I never imagined the day would come when my own parents would look me dead in the eye and say, "You're just the help in a suit, sign the exit papers." But that's exactly what they did. My name is Leora Ashford, and just 2 weeks ago, I was the Chief Creative Officer of Ashford Media, the brand I helped build from the ground up. 10 years of sacrifice, of vision, of loyalty, reduced to a contract and a cold smile across the boardroom table. They thought I'd walk away quietly. No fight, no fuss. They thought wrong. I said one thing before I stood up. I signed, just not yours. If you've ever been underestimated by your own blood pushed aside in a space you helped build, hit that subscribe button. What comes next might be exactly the revenge story you didn't know you needed. Leora Ashford had always known she wasn't the favorite child. From the moment her older brother Beckett was born, the Ashford legacy had a name, a face, and a future that didn't include her, not really. She was the creative one, the outlier, the girl who wore bold colors and dreamed in campaigns, not spreadsheets. But when Ashford Media floundered during the digital collapse 5 years ago, it wasn't Beckett who saved it. It was Leora. She rebranded the company. She hired the first influencer team before anyone else believed in short-form marketing. She redesigned the client onboarding system and brought in 3 national contracts in a single year. She worked 80-hour weeks while Beckett took credit at family dinners, smiling with wine-stained teeth and empty hands. Marshall Ashford, her father called her sharp but unstable. Vivian Ashford, her mother referred to her work as useful but temporary. And yet quarter after quarter, it was Leora's team that hit target after target. She didn't mind not getting the spotlight until they handed her a termination packet, printed on premium ivory stock slid across the boardroom table as if she were an intern on her first day. It wasn't just the firing. It was the smirk on Beckett's face. The way her mother leaned back, arms crossed like she'd won something. The silence from her father, the one man who knew just how hard Leora had worked to save their name. She stared at the envelope for a full 30 seconds. Then she smiled. Because they thought she would cry. They thought she would beg. But Leora had already signed something. Something her parents had forgotten existed. Something older than their paperwork. More binding than their pride. And that something would soon burn everything they built. The office felt colder than usual as Leora stepped into the elevator, the exit envelope still untouched in her hand. She didn't press any buttons. She didn't need to. The elevator moved on its own, descending floor by floor, as if the building itself was in on the betrayal. No one made eye contact as she passed the marketing wing, the same team she built from scratch. Some avoided her gaze. A few offered hesitant nods. But no one spoke. That silence. It hurt more than her parents' words. By the time she stepped out into the open-air parking deck, Leora had already made the first move. She didn't drive home. She drove to East 9th Street, to the rust-colored building with no signage where the windows were always shuttered and the buzzer didn't work. She knocked 4 times. Paused. Then twice more. The door opened. Noelle Wren hadn't aged a day. Disbarred 2 years earlier after a high-profile case blew up in court, she had retreated into legal shadows, but not before teaching Leora the fine art of weaponizing loopholes. "I was wondering when you'd come back," Noelle said with a crooked grin. Leora dropped the envelope on the desk. "They finally did it. They fired you." Noelle raised a brow. "They said I'm just the help in a suit." Noelle let out a dry laugh. "How poetic of them." Leora opened her phone and pulled up an old document one Noelle had drafted 7 years ago when the company was restructuring and needed quick signatures from all stakeholders to transfer creative rights to a new division. That document had a quiet little clause in a sub-paragraph on page 14 that stated, "In the event of involuntary separation, the original signatory retains full creative control of all original intellectual property tied to Ashford Media's brand identity." That meant every logo, every tagline, every design element, every pitch deck, everything Leora had created, everything Beckett was now parading around as his own. "They forgot," Leora said softly, "that I never forget. Noelle reached into a drawer and pulled out a flash drive. This has the time-stamped drafts, contracts, emails. If they so much as publish a holiday ad without your consent, I'll bury them in court. No. Noelle leaned in. You'll bury them in public first. Leora exhaled slowly, a fire beginning to take shape behind her eyes. Ashford Media thought they'd fired her. What they'd really done was give her permission. The next morning, Ashford Media launched their winter campaign. Beckett's face was front and center in magazine spreads, subway banners, even a Times Square digital ad claiming innovation runs in the family. What the public didn't know, the entire visual concept from the snowy typeface to the slogan had been designed by Leora. What the Ashfords didn't know, Leora still held exclusive creative rights to all of it. By 9:00 a.m., she'd already emailed 3 media watchdog outlets. By 10:15, one of them published a headline: Ashford Media accused of using fired execs' designs without consent. And by noon, Who Owns Ashford was trending. The company issued a vague statement denying wrongdoing. Leora didn't respond. She didn't have to. Instead, she met with Leo Ramsey, the quiet billionaire investor who never appeared in public and operated almost entirely through shell firms and proxies. I hear you've got a branding problem, Leo said, sipping espresso in a low-lit Austin cafe. I hear you like owning things other people are too arrogant to protect, Leora replied. They smiled. What she offered him was simple: a chance to buy into every consumer-facing asset she controlled, trademarks, campaign rights, even client lists. In return, he would do one thing: buy out enough shares to make Beckett squirm. This isn't revenge, Leo said, signing the initial letter of intent. It's leverage, Leora answered, and I'm very good at using it. Meanwhile, inside Ashford Media, chaos had begun to spread. The PR department panicked. Sponsors called. One client, a massive retail chain, pulled out of a 6-month contract without warning. And Beckett. He still smiled through interviews, pretending he wasn't bleeding out in real time. 2 days later, the boardroom at Ashford Media no longer smelled like power. It smelled like panic. Vivian Ashford stood at the head of the table, flipping through reports with trembling fingers. Brand sentiment had dropped 34% in 48 hours. Their winter campaign was now tied to public controversy. Clients were jittery, and Beckett had locked himself in his office claiming he was strategizing. But everyone knew he was spiraling. What do you mean we don't have full ownership of the campaign assets? Vivian hissed at the company's legal team. The clause was buried in the 2016 restructuring packet, the junior attorney stammered. Leora's name is on all the original filings. We never removed her. Marshall Ashford said nothing. He just stared at the projection screen where headlines flickered like a countdown clock. Then came the knock. Everyone turned. It wasn't Leora. It was Noelle Wren. Uninvited, unapologetic, she strode in heels sharp against the marble floor and placed a manila folder in front of Marshall. Per Section 14C of your own shareholder bylaws, Leora Ashford has called for an emergency review of voting control. You have 48 hours to produce all share certificates and account for transfer activity, or she will file an injunction. Vivian's voice was sharp. She doesn't have the power to. She doesn't need power, Noelle cut in. She has proof. Then calmly she slid a single sheet across the table. It was a signed transfer form, dated just after the restructuring, showing a silent sale of 12% of non-voting shares to a firm now owned by Leo Ramsey. She gave away pieces of the company you ignored, Noelle said, eyes gleaming. And she's buying it back one signature at a time. Marshall looked pale. Vivian slammed her laptop shut, and for the first time in years, the Ashfords had no idea what to do. Because for the first time, they weren't holding the leash. Beckett Ashford was used to applause, not silence. For years he'd been paraded as the heir, the face, the future. But now the boardroom was quiet. Too quiet. Not one person clapped when he entered the strategy meeting. They were waiting not for him, but for something else. Worse, for someone else. Leora's shadow had begun to stretch through every corridor of Ashford Media. Interns whispered her name like a legend. Mid-level managers began referencing her documents. Old clients reached out asking, "Is she coming back?" And Beckett. he snapped. He ordered the removal of all branding tied to her tenure. New colors, new fonts, new messaging. We're burning the old image, he declared. But the more he cut her out, the more unstable everything became. The creative team resigned en masse. A junior executive leaked an internal email chain where Beckett mocked mental health campaigns, one of Leora's hallmark initiatives. The media exploded. And Leora, she watched it all unfold. From a quiet, co-working space across town, sipping ginger tea, her phone lighting up every 30 seconds with headlines. Ashford Media CEO accused of erasing founder's daughter backlash, grows against corporate nepotism, bring back Leora trending worldwide. Noelle Wren called. It's happening faster than we thought. Leora didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply said it has to break before it can be rebuilt. Because she didn't want her name back on a building she didn't control. She wanted something far bigger. Ownership without their permission. And the final piece of that plan would fall into place at the annual shareholders meeting. The ballroom at the Belmont Grand Hotel was decked in gold and arrogance. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above rows of polished investors. Cameras clicked. Journalists whispered. It was supposed to be Beckett Ashford's crowning moment, his first annual shareholders meeting as the face of Ashford Media. He took the stage grinning like a game show host. Behind him, a massive screen displayed the words Ashford 2025 Reimagining Legacy. Beckett cleared his throat. Today we write the next chapter. But he didn't finish, because the ballroom doors opened and Leo Ramsey walked in. He wasn't on the guest list. He wasn't introduced. He didn't need to be. People stood. Phones came out. Board members turned pale. Leo took a seat in the front row and placed a slim black folder on the table beside him. Beckett hesitated, then pushed on. We write the next chapter by honoring the strength of our leadership team. At that moment, Marshall and Vivian Ashford received simultaneous text messages from legal. Their eyes darted to the screen, then to Leo, then to each other. It took less than 2 minutes for the energy in the room to change. Because the document Leo had just filed and emailed to every top-tier investor was a motion to restructure the board of directors, backed by 34% of voting shares, enough to trigger an emergency vote, enough to call for removal of current executive leadership, enough to name a temporary executive chair. And the name listed, Leora Ashford, not as heir, not as daughter, not as employee, as owner. Beckett froze. Vivian stood up. Marshall didn't move. The board's head counsel confirmed the validity. One by one, hands raised. The vote passed. Just like that, the Ashfords lost the company they thought they'd buried her in. And Leora, she entered through the back door dressed in black, calm as glass, and took her seat at the head of the table. She didn't say a word, because she didn't need to. Leora didn't linger. She sat through the final procedural formalities with the silence of someone who no longer needed to prove anything. The votes were tallied. The board was reshuffled. Beckett's name was stripped from the digital directory in less than an hour, but she wasn't here for that. She didn't even glance at the Ashfords when they were escorted out, her mother still protesting, her father staring blankly at the marble floor, like it might open up and swallow him whole. Instead, she walked to the side of the room, where a group of junior creatives stood. People she had hired. People she had mentored. One of them was crying. "I never thought you'd come back," the girl whispered. Leora gave her a steady look. "I didn't." And she meant it. Because this wasn't a return. This was a release. She signed the documents transferring temporary executive control to Leo Ramsey under a 6-month clause, not because she needed distance, but because she had plans beyond Ashford. Bigger. Quieter. Her own. At the very end of the meeting, as the press swarmed outside and the former power duo stumbled toward their black car in silence, Marshall turned back. His voice cracked for the first time. Why, he asked. Leora met his eyes not with hate, not with pride, but something colder, detachment. "You told me to sign," she said, then paused, smiled. "I did. Just not your version." She walked away, heels echoing through the lobby like a quiet drum roll. Behind her, the company bore her fingerprints. Ahead of her, the world opened wide. and this time it belonged to her.